Hey, okay, so first of all, oh, there he is. Just have one more section to go, and then he's all done. Oh, his hair was a pain in the ass. Oh, you know, there's always that one challenge that comes up. And I didn't think that it would be that much of a problem to stitch his hair. But here we are. Now, another thing that I want to point out is usually I have back here uh those stitch pieces. Well, I got this for my birthday. My mom was so happy to get that. And it says, let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. And that old jingle from classic jingle. And because when I come out of my room, a lot of times when I want to get a snack, I say that. And sometimes I do the little thing that the little characters do. So when she found that, and I think it fits with the silent film critiques as well. So this is going to stay up and and everything. So, but we are going to look at more Seattle newsies. And I meant to do that last week and things happened like they do. Life is unpredictable. But you know what? I'm actually glad for the delay because as I was going through and looking at more stuff, um, I found things as I do. So, but the first thing that I want to look at, we're gonna take a side trip to New York because with now I've been watching Newsies since I was 10 years old. Okay, so 1992, 10 years old. And I'm old, okay? And ever since then, I have been looking at, the Pulitzer, Hearst, all of that, the news. Yeah, so um the newspaper industry and all of that. And Paperboy is one of my favorite favorite games. And Paperboy 2 is just a copy and paste. They just added a news girl. It's not that great. I don't but I found a couple of articles and I was like, I've never heard of this before. Now, I'm sure that there are people who are New York historians that have heard this, but bear with me, okay? I've said before, I don't know everything, okay? So, but I wanted to talk about it because it was something that I had never heard of. Okay. Um, so I found a couple articles. I'm gonna look at the one that has a little more detail. The other one basically talks more about Mrs. Pulitzer. Now, the interesting thing about that is that Mrs. Pulitzer pretty much stayed out of the spotlight. And I mean, she was known as Mrs. Joseph Pulitzer. You didn't really see her in the news a lot. And but it was mainly Joseph Pulitzer. And then when his illness got to be too much, this is one of the big inaccuracies of Newsies is that by 1899, his son Ralph would have been the one running the show. Joseph Pulitzer would have been in the soundproof room because his illness would have been so bad that he just couldn't. He'd come to work, but he he just Sykes would have been reporting to Ralph. So there's that to consider. So that's one of the reasons why this was so unusual for me, seeing her in the news. But then when I saw what exactly was happening, I was like, this is terrible. So their house was on fire. This was January 10th, 1900. Okay, so this was not even a year after the strike. I'm telling you, this family has so much. They're so unlucky. It's terrible. So January 10th, 1900 is when our newspaper printed the news. Um, so Pulitzer's house burned, governess and housekeeper lose their lives. And now, when I first read that, I was like, well, this should have been a scandal. I mean, a governess dies in a fire at Joseph Pulitzer's house. I mean, Hearst would have had a field day with that. You know he would have. Okay. But you go further into it. Mrs. Pulitzer saved her kids and helped get uh her servants out. They had 14 servants. I'm sitting there and I'm just like, that's a lot. That's a lot of servants. Um, so it said that the residence of Joseph Pulitzer was destroyed by a fire. Uh, and two women servants. Oh, I guess governess. I always forget okay. It says two women servants were suffocated or burned to death. The total loss estimated at about $300,000. Now, I tried to find out what the total cost of that would be today, and everywhere I went, they just wanted to start the the year wanted to start at 1913, so it didn't want to do yeah, I tried. If you can find somewhere that would do the calculation, let us know because I looked everywhere wanted to start at 1913. It's like, okay, there were years before that, but sure, my dude. Okay, here's the thing. I always forget that so I always want to make a governess like a fancy title, like a aristocratic title. And in certain ways it is, but in other ways it I guess it depends where it is a servant title. I don't it is confusing because yeah, make up your mind on the title thing. How about we don't do titles? Reminds me of that Fairly Odd Parents where they where he wished that everybody was the same and I think Gilbert Gottfried, may he rest in peace, was the voice of yeah, because I think it was like the dentist was bothering him so much that dentist next door or something. Oh gosh. Anyway, so victims of the fire were Mrs. Morgan Gillette, the housekeeper, and Miss Montgomery, a governess. And the origin of the fire is variously ascribed to electric wires, the steam heater, and an open fire. Dude, what are you doing? It's like, I will use all the references. Like in A Christmas Story, where it's, don't anybody move. It's just one too many. Pulitzer. And this was during a time when electricity was still very dangerous. They had the telephone poles, and they had like 5 rows, or the 5 things, and they just had wires everywhere, and the wires weren't coated yet. They weren't safety coated. I mean, it's, dude, what are you doing? Oh my gosh. This is a lot like how the Great Fire of 1666 started. It's just like, oh, whatever. At least they were smarter then. I mean, because one of the things that they talk about in those documentaries for the Great Fire of 1666 is that they knew about how embers start fires, and that flour is very flammable. And that's why bakers, even the royal bakers, were not near the castle. Pulitzer, what are you doing, my dude? I mean, gosh. Okay. So it was at 7:30 a.m. and the kids were there, but Mrs. Pulitzer was able to get them out. She then went back in to help them. Uh, yeah, a 12, 14-year-old and her son. So two daughters, 12 and 13 years old. And Herbert was 3 at the time. The housekeeper and the governess were asleep. Uh, Pulitzer and his son Joseph were gone. 16 servants in the house. That's overkill. You don't need. How big was that? I've never seen their house. There's these pictures. I have seen people look at these. There's like these interior shots that are connected to Joseph Pulitzer. People keep wanting to say that they are connected to the world building, because there's not a lot of interior shots of the world building. And no, if you actually read the caption, it says that it's his house. It must be this place. It's his home. It's uh why would he have like a bed? Especially with everything that it talked about with uh his office building. Where he had a soundproof room and everything. That just doesn't add up. All the interior shots that they show. Yeah, I think it would be this way. Yeah, I've never seen um it's it's funny how now you see all these. It's like the mansions now where they spend way too much fucking money on these, where it's like they have to have 3 houses merged together, and it's like, why would you need, why for 2 people, why do you need that? And okay, so you wasted money. That's awesome. And then you see uh from like the Gilded Age, you look at Andrew Carnegie's mansion, and he was even making, I mean, even when his friends were splurging, their mansions, even when they were splurging to build these things, aren't aren't that big. Um, they're extravagant, but they aren't that huge. But he kept it simple. He's like, why do I need to uh for somebody who was the richest guy in the world, it was like so the fire was discovered, flames spread rapidly and were beyond control. Mrs. Pulitzer got out okay, the kids got out okay, mostly everybody except for the two that died. There was one gentleman who said he was one of the servants. He said that he saw Mrs. Gillette, the housekeeper, on the roof and that she went back to get a bag containing Christmas presents. I don't understand this part. Okay, this is January. Why are you getting Christmas presents? The only thing I can think is that um just like with that with the documentary of Great Fire 6066 is that there were firefighters that they interviewed who said that a lot of times when there's smoke and everything, the smoke of fire and everything like that, it does mess with you and it's like you're not in your right mind and so it just and that's why it annoys me when people are like, well, what I would do. And it's like, okay, what would you do? You'd probably do the same thing. Quit being a jackass. I can't stand those people where they get and they act like they're going to be the total savior of the day if they were in that situation. And it's like, no, you'd run around like a chicken with your head cut off too. Okay, let's just be honest with each other. You would be in that state of mind because you're so consumed by whatever's going on. You'd be in that state of fear that you'd be running around crazy. You'd probably, y- you wouldn't know what to do. So shut up. Can't stand it right now. I remember as a teenager, I used to say, see, when you're a teenager, it's one thing because you're going to take on the world and and so as a teenager, I used to say that all the time. But then once I hit my 20s and I started getting in those situations, I'm like, bloody hell, never mind. Never say that again. Uh, she was found, Mrs. Gillette was found uh, on the top floor. She was still holding the bag. That is just very sad. Uh, the governess, Mrs. Montgomery, was found on the third floor. She hardly had time to put anything on so that she could get out before she was overcome. Her body was not badly burned, showing that she had probably been suffocated by the smoke. So, just a very sad situation altogether. Uh, but you know, like I said, this was something that I had never heard of before, given all that I have come across when it came to uh, Pulitzer and even William Randolph. I would have thought that William Randolph Hearst would have had a field day with this, but and maybe he did, and it was just kind of a small little scandal here, and then it just went away. It was like, okay, and because this I don't know, or maybe he was still kind of hurting from the strike and he decided, you know what, I'll give this one a pass. Whatever. I'm licking my wounds right now. And but yeah, it's very sad situation. to see that. And when I first read it, as you obviously saw again, the the governess, I always want to make a governess a higher title, and in many situations it is a high title. And in this case, it's just a servant. A governess takes care of the children. If memory serves, that's what she does. He or she does. Governess is a woman. But anyway, so that's what happened in New York in 1900. I don't know if it actually burned down or it just badly burned. I don't know if it's still there. Those of you in New York can obviously fill in the blanks. I have no problem with you doing that. I never have a problem with that. So let's go back over to Seattle because one of the things, and I'm going to be flip-flopping here like I usually do. So in the last video, I talked about how I hadn't really found where the Newsboy Union had like an ending point, where it just kind of drifted and they weren't doing anything anymore. And because it was established again in 1892, they had gone on strike and everything. And so I was still trying to find if maybe they were still going strong like during the war, or like uh because in the 20s I was still seeing them going. So did they still go like in World War II? And well, I found it. Um, as it so happens, uh, the Newsies caught the boxing bug. And yes, indeed, they caught the boxing bug. Uh, there's actually, let's see, where was it? I believe, yeah, there were a few, like this one right here. It says, Newsboy Battlers on amateur card. Uh, Ted Whitman has lined up a great card for the Friday night amateur smoker at the uh, Austin, I think that's Gymnasium. It's kind of scratched out. The Newsboy Union will be well represented on the card, and I found several of these where they were the Newsboy Battlers. There was another one that, let me see, what was this one? Uh, Newsboys will stage amateur fight program. And now this is 1925, and into the 30s, I saw some boxers that were using the Newsboy name. There was one in particular, let's see, what was his name? Big Boy's Top Fight Show next Tuesday night. And there were, let's see, what was his name? Newsboy Milich. And but he wasn't the only one. There were like three or four other guys that I saw that had Newsboy in his name. And so they they pretty much switched over to these fights. That's what they did. That's what they were into at that point. And they were they they were street fighters. They were funding fight. To be honest, by this point, boxing had become big. people were making a lot of money. One thing about James Cagney is that his father had died and or had become really sick. I don't think he had died yet, but either way, um, and he was a boxer to make money for the family. That's what he did. And so it it makes me laugh when people think that he was just acting in that movie. It's like, no, he was an actual boxer. There are some people that actually, it's not like, yeah, they don't do method acting, not always, not like Christian Bale and Jared Leto. Oh, I said it, and I know what they are. I may be a fan, but I'll call them out. But now here's the thing is that even though the kids had basically kind of drifted from doing the dinners and the balls and that and they would show up. I didn't even see where they were showing up to as they were at like the picnics and that kind of thing and show up in the parades and all that. There were a few instances where they would still show up at certain things and try to use their newsboy union status to kind of push something. I don't think it worked, but they did try because I saw in like I think it was there was an instance in 32 where a couple of newsies didn't like something political going on, and so they tried to say, "Well, we're part of the Newsboy Union. Remember that?" It's like, yeah, we remember, but you haven't really done anything for the community for quite some time. What are you doing here? I mean, it's cool that you fund the fights and everything that, these, uh, you know, I'm sorry. So, so they were pretty much done as a as the union that they were by the late 20s, and then they had pretty much just, yeah, it was pretty much over. I mean, the union had trickled into disappearing, doing their disappearing app. I mean, I'm not surprised that it was gone when the stock market crashed. I mean, the fact that there were those kids that tried to push that whole thing and everything, trying to use that whole thing for whatever reason, does not surprise me either, considering what was going on at the time. So, and then of course for the 30s to have these boxing matches with the Newsboy Union and for them to be using the Newsboy Union for this. I mean, I said it in the first video. They're scrappy kids. Should have seen it coming. Now, speaking of the war, this one, um, Nathan P. Birch. Okay. I- I'm surprised that there aren't more like this kiddo, which he isn't really that much of a kiddo. It turns out that he was a draft dodger. Okay, so World War One was going on. This is in 1918. This is he was found out. I believe I saw he was discovered in June of 1918. And so it was found out that he had been lying about his age. And I couldn't find out exactly what age he actually was. He, he was actually 32 years old. The Newsboy Union covered for him. And they basically were saying, oh, yeah, so he must have had this young looking face, this young, fresh face that made him able to pass. Now, by 1918, you have to remember the war ended in 1918. So I'm kind of surprised that they're so. Now, again, um I'm not sure why they would be so upset by the time the war so well, it would be November that so the war was still going. Okay. So that answers my question there. Um as I was reading up on his because he had a trial. The fact that here's this 32-year-old man passing off as a newsie. Now, I don't know how tall he was or anything. I don't think that matters. I don't know how old he actually said he was or anything like that. Now, you have to understand, there are people who think that I'm still in my 20s. Now, again, I just turned 42 years old. So I'll take it for as long as I can. I'm waiting for gravity to take its course, you know. So, in the case of Nathan, it had to have been the same thing. He must have had a really young look and had been able to pass it off. The newsboys just kind of, again, these kids, you think about, oh, the little guy that ran away and his grandfather made him go to, he told the judge, send him to reform school. There's nothing more I can do. His parents have left. And but the newsboys knew that he ran away all the time. And they're like, oh, he's fine. Yeah. Same kind of instance where they look out for each other. And so, well, we don't want to see him go to war. Why would we want him to do that? And so he was caught, obviously. And well, here's the thing about it. Okay. As it turns out, let me bring this up here. His attorney, again, this was in 1918. Let's see. By July 18th, he was going to go into court in federal court. His trial was federal court. His attorney was a woman. Now, this was a big deal because she was, let's see, what was her full name? Does it say on this? Let's see. Charlotte Colmetz, newly appointed Assistant United States District Attorney, appeared with district. Oh, so she's a assistant. But her appearance in this case, her debut m made history because of the fact that she was a woman, the first woman district attorney, from what I was understanding when I was reading this. Now, again, you can correct me, but from what I was understanding when I was reading through all of this, that's what I was getting. Now, uh, let's see, because it says makes debut in first U.S. case. So it was her first U.S. case. Maybe that's why it got okay. So maybe that answers that. Um, but it did. It sounded like she was the first woman to appear, the first woman anyway. Um, I mean, I do have to be honest here because uh, for as much, I mean, this was like during the time when the suffragettes were going. I was seeing a lot of suffragette news and everything. The suffragettes were fighting and everything because they were going at the same time that World War One was going and all of this stuff. But you have to understand that even here in Washington State, women were already sitting on a jury. That was something that I found out when I did my book. Forgot to put it here. Because I was doing research for for courts and how they worked at um in 1912 and ended up down a rabbit hole and found out that in Washington State, going as far back as the late 1800s, there were women on the jury. So, so yeah, we were yeah, so it could be she wasn't but she made her debut. Anyway, I got excited. I'm sorry. So, moving on from that. So she makes her debut as the assistant district attorney. Nathan Birch uh is set to stand trial because of the fact that he lied about his age, draft dodger, and again, remember, the war is still going on. This is July, and the war ended in November. That was Armistice Day, if memory serves. And so he attempted to prove that he was over the draft age. Oh, I thought he tried to prove that he was younger. I I guess I got that mixed up. Uh, Now Nathan at this time is the president of the Newsboy organization of the union. Um, yeah, it was her first trial appearance. Okay. His attorneys moved for a continuance of the case in order to give the birth his birth certificate time to arrive from England. Ah, he's from England. The motion was denied. I can understand that. I mean, the war is going on. Okay, witnesses for the government testified that Birch had said upon his arrest last November that he was born in New York. Members of the police department who had booked Birch on several charges at different times testified that in 1913 he had given his age at 20. Ah. See, I talked about this in several videos where these newsies like to, yeah, is he, oh, oh man. Well, let's see. If this is 1918, I wonder if he's one of Kid Blink's kids, if he was actually from New York. That would be so funny. That would be the funniest thing ever if they crossed over and he was the link. Okay. Witnesses called by the government were, okay, so let's see. Uh, Chairman of the local draft board, he was one of the witnesses where Bert should have registered had he been within draft age. The case was expected to go to the jury in the middle of the afternoon. Okay, and then in September, because it it just kept going. The it was like the jury did this. Yeah, it dragged for a long time. So in September, leader of Newsboys to serve sentence. Okay, so Nathan, head of the Seattle Newsboys Union, committed to serve 60-day jail sentence 6 weeks ago following conviction of evading the draft and ordered inducted into Army service. Given what we know now, I mean, I have to laugh. I mean, because of the fact this is September and 2 months, so he's going to be in the Army for like 2 months. Birch has been at liberty on uh supersedes bond. I think that's the word. It's kind of blurred out. Pending appeal of his case. Yeah, so they basically were not having it. They're like, um, okay, so he must look older. Forget what I said before. If he's passing himself off as he's he's saying all kinds of lies. That would be so funny though, if he's the link to be hilarious, man. I kind of want that because we already have Pie Eater. And if this kid is from New York, I do have to say though, since I'm thinking about it now, there are a lot of these kids that by the 20s, I, especially like in the late teens and 20s, that were from New York. And yeah, I was seeing a lot of New York newsies popping up. They're like, yeah, they were from New York and now they're here and all this. It was like, so I don't, I'm not sure what made them decide to come over here. Who knows? But what was going on in New York in the 20s that made these kids decide to come over here? Santa Fe, are you there? No, it was really Seattle. I reference that movie too much. Oh, it runs my life. Damn, it's embedded in my DNA. Oh, good gosh. Yeah, he in July of 20 because he went on trial July 18th and July 27th he gets that 60-day sentence and it says sentenced by federal judge this morning to 60 days in jail and induction into the army. He was convicted as a slacker to register. He claimed he was 32 years old. Yeah, he claimed he was 32. So, but how old is he? See, I tried to find that, and if he's telling people that he's like 20 years old and he's actually 32 and everything, yeah, draft dodger. He's a slacker, draft dodging slacker. He's obviously from New York because it sounds like tricks that they did. You're teaching our kids bad things as if they need any encouragement. Some of the stuff that I've read, I mean, that's I've yeah. But so yeah, he had a woman assistant district attorney, and which I got excited, but it's not really that much of a big deal, especially if we've in the 18 late 1800s already had women on the jury. And there was also a case in California. This I got to bring this up because it was one this this guy um was accused of cheating on his wife. To this day, I don't think he did. I think that she just decided that he did. There was a the the jury because this was down in California. I don't remember where exactly, but the trial, I mean, the jury consisted of all women, and they all decided that he did it. So he went to jail for something. I looked at that. Because again, that was another one that I looked at when I was doing this, and it's like, I don't think he did anything. I I don't know what. I mean, she was just mad about something, and it was like she just decided one day that he was cheating on her. I was like, but where in the world did you get that? Insecure women, I don't understand them. I felt bad for the guy. I really did. It was like, that was a rigged jury. It really is. Because I was like, that's, is this what girl code is? Because I hate it. I had some girl, she was like, don't you stand by girl code? I was like, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Don't talk to me about things I don't know. If I think you're doing something shitty, I'm not going to stand by you. I don't care who you are. Ugh. So anyway, that was Nathan. That was Nathan Birch. He was the president of the Newsboy Union in 1918. He was a draft dodger and, according to the judge, a slacker. So, and quite honestly, I didn't, he's the only one that I came across, but I'm just sure that there were more of those. And, and let's just all agree that he was the connection to New York. 'Cause, again, I am coming across a lot, especially in the 20s, the late teens and the 20s, especially the 20s, where newsies talk about how they were from New York, it came over, and I'm just I'm just wondering what was happening in New York in the 20s that they decided to come. Of course, there was a lot of partying going on, so it was the calm before the storm that happened in 1929. Let's just put it that way. So so there was the draft dodger. Okay. Now, before we look at him, before we look at this little bit of a scandal, let's see. What was this one? No, no. There was something that I saw today, and I wanted to talk about it. Ah, yes. I think this is another one that it was originally let's see. Yes, it is. Okay, so here is uh Jacqueline D'Armond, or Darmond, I guess. Don't have to put the accent there. And uh she. And let's see, it says $4.80 coupled with a boyish love for adventure is quite sufficient for one who wants to see the world, declares Miss Jacqueline, who has just hiked from New York to the Pacific coast, uh, with the amount of money and dressed in boyish garb. She added to her original income by becoming a newsboy. Uh, real sex was unexpected in various cities en route. And this is one of those where of course, the newspaper is showing off different newsies from the area, and Jacqueline, of course, it was like, oh, surprise. So yeah, Jacqueline is another one that is from New York. And oh, what was the year on Jacqueline? 1924. September 15th, 1924 is when she ended up in the newspaper. And you know, quite honestly, not uncommon for the for news girls to dress up like a boy. Absolutely not uncommon. And not uncommon for the girls to talk like the boy. Uh, there's a um some of the Lewis Hine news girls. Uh, oh gosh, I can't think of her name right now. I think I discontinued her picture, but there's a girl from Connecticut, and it's noted that she has as much of a foul mouth as the boys do. Yeah. Um, I mean, they were tough stuff. I mean, considering the fact that they were on the streets selling they had to take care of themselves. Why? They were no delicate flowers. I let you know it. And 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 you know, the fun thing about it that because a lot of my wardrobe is newsy attire. So yeah, I sometimes dress as and but that was the thing in a lot of our back in the day, a lot of our fan fiction was that our self inserts would do the whole thing of dressing like the boys and wearing the knickerbockers and the leggings and all of that. And wasn't so much wearing the skirts and wearing the outfit. Yeah, because why? And so it was either the self-inserts or the original characters that you put in there. Yeah. And sometimes our self-inserts turned into original characters as they evolved. Anyway, yeah, mine did. And yeah, let's see. Wasn't there another one? I think let's see. I think he's, oh yes, let's talk about him. Because I want to talk a little more about more news. I feel like I didn't do that in the last one. And so moving on from Jacqueline, this guy is from March 10th, 1910, and this is Eddie Cameron, smallest newsboy, doesn't own a corner. He's a traveling salesman. And, Tacoma's smallest newsboy. He is. He's a tiny little guy. Smallest member of the Newsboy Union is a familiar person on Pacific Avenue and other business streets. Eddie doesn't own any particular corner, as most of the other boys do, so he is really a traveling salesman. Uh, and he is a pretty good salesman at that. For every night, he disposes from 70 to 80 papers. Wow, he is good. Or he was. That's not bad. Or traveling up and down the streets, dodging the territory owned by other boys. Oh, he's stealing sales. But that's genius. That is genius. He's ruthless. Oh, good heavens. Yeah, sometimes that's what you gotta do. And when you have a cute little face like that, why not? Oh, let's see. Eddie regularly takes out 65 copies of the Times, and his sales seldom drop below that number. He sells 5 copies of the Times to one of any other paper, his average sales usually being 60 copies of the Times and 6 copies of each of the other afternoon papers. Okay, so this is something that I noticed with a lot of these kids is that they are not connected with one newspaper. Uh, Not always, like Trilby Collins was with the um with PI and because I can't think of the name right now, but the Post anyway. Um and then you had these others that were with the Times. Well, he's selling like back and forth with several different ones. And now I don't know how it was with over in New York or anywhere in general, but um it just from my understanding, it was that the kids were connected to that particular. So if they sold with Pulitzer, they stuck with Pulitzer until, yeah, like they were like an associate with him, you know. But in these cases, over here, they can sell with however many papers. And so I found that interesting. Now, that doesn't mean that that didn't happen over in New York or anywhere else, and so the only reason that because of the fact that, okay, so they got really upset that the price wasn't down, and it's like, okay, so why don't you just go to another newspaper? We look at it now and we're like, okay, because there are so many people who are mad at Pulitzer for, well, you lived on the streets once before. Why can't you just bring it down? And it's like, why are you letting money get in the way of this? And I've seen the arguments. Okay. And it's like, but by the same token, why didn't the newsies just leave and go to another newspaper? The ones that did bring the price down, you know, because what's funny is that these kids, they went on strike, and I haven't seen a strike since. They can sell with whoever they want to. Everybody's happy. So, so look, I'm not trying to, before you get the wrong idea, I'm not trying to suddenly become a big old fan for Seattle and trash New York or anything like that. No, I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm just trying to look at the facts here. Okay, and you can by all means discuss in the comment section. I would love to. Okay. Please do not get the wrong idea. Because the last thing I need is for people to come after me with thinking the wrong thing. No. Um, let's see. He says, uh, Eddie's business is just about half as large as that of John Dawson. Oh, I think I have John. We'll look at him in a minute. The Star Newsboy, who sells 160 copies of the Times every night. And man, these kids are going. Man, someday Eddie expects to buy a regular corner and then he will challenge Dawson for the championship. I hope that happened. Or maybe they grew up and became boxers. Who knows? You go, Eddie. You get him. All right, let's look at, because I think I do. John Dawson right here. This is 1910. Let's look at this little peanut right here. Okay, so he says, I sell 4 copies of the Times to one of any other papers. Uh, so John Dawson, champion newsboy of Tacoma, president of the Newsboy Union, and owner of the corner at 11th and Pacific Avenue under the union rules. Uh, eh, let's see, John Dawson knows why you see 4 copies of the Times to one of any other paper on the streetcars, in the hotels, etc. Knows because he sells them. He takes his position at 3 o'clock every afternoon with 175 copies of the Times. Man, he's loaded. When he is through, he is usually sold out. Man, he's an overachiever. Oh man. I think it's cute that Eddie wants to take him out. I hope that happened. At least see him in a boxing match. How about we just decide that that happened, that these 2 kids were in a boxing match? How do you think that happened? How do you think it worked? It doesn't even say how tall little Eddie is. I mean, he looks like a little, he's just a little guy. But sometimes it's the little ones you have to worry about. Well, let's see. I sell an average of over 160 times every night, said Dawson, and an average of 40 of each of the other afternoon papers. Without the Times, the bottom would drop out of my business. See, they see it as they're like little business kids. It's- Oh my gosh. Let's see. Many of my customers pay me by the week, and as they pass my corner, I hand out their Times without delaying them a second. How old is he though? To have this business sense and be like, because in the picture, he looks probably 12, 13 years old. And to have that kind of business sense at that age, and he probably had it even before that, for him to be the champion newsboy of Tacoma. And he didn't just get it overnight. So obviously when he was like even 8, 9 years old, he worked at this. Some days I sell 10 copies of the Times in 5 minutes. That's 2 copies in a minute. Kid. Oh my gosh. I believe I sell more papers than anyone else. Okay, now you're just bragging. Oh gosh. Okay, so up here, because it did say, let's see, the owner of the corner of 11th and Pacific Avenue under the union rules. So it sounds like the union, now it could be just the Tacoma Union, Newsboy Union. It sounds like you are given a designated corner. And now in uh in Newsies, of course, they talk about selling spots and everything, where they sell and all that and everything. They just sell wherever. I don't know if it would be the same thing that it- you know that the union that they had gave them designated spots and it was documented that that is your spot, you have to go. You know, it, and unless there's another reason why you have to change. So who knows? Maybe the Seattle kids did the same thing. And let's just decide that, that John Dawson and little Eddie had a boxing match. Who won? Say in the comments. I love it. I love Eddie's enthusiasm. He's gonna get him, the little ankle biter. Oh my goodness. I love it. Oh my gosh. So anyway, those are some more of the newsies. Again, when was he in it again? Um, Let me look. So they were both 1910. Um, Now what I want to look at is actually this was a scandal that hit the Seattle Times. And I I was like, weird. Now the Seattle Times is still going and it's still family owned. This was when I went to look it up to see what more I could find outside of, newspaper articles and everything. I couldn't find anything. Again, I could just be looking on the wrong side of the internet. It's happened before. But you know, so okay, starting to get ahead of myself. All right. Hey. All right, so editing me here. And basically when it comes down to um this newspaper man with the Seattle Times, the scandal that goes on there and the grand jury, I'm gonna break it down because I don't really do it well earlier. And basically, what happens is there were letters that found this detective goes full Dick Tracy, finds these letters, and it basically explodes into that this newspaper man, Blethel, AJ Blethel, uh, Colonel Blethel, is the founder of the Seattle Times. And now understand that he also has a son named AJ. Uh, it's not the son. It took me a long time to figure that out. This is the dad. Okay, this is the founder of, but here's the frustrating part is that with him and the conspirators of all this, all of them that are being accused, his son, I believe is CJ, is also brought into it. And CB, and I don't know the full name of him. I think it's Claude. But so AJ Blethen, CB Blethen are accused alongside uh a lot of their other conspirators. There's let's see. That one is, oh, where's the one? I had it here. Let's see. Yes, here it is. Um, Now, the thing that went down about this is apparently it boils down to politics. Uh, AJ, it's always politics. I mean, Pulitzer, same thing. There was a politician named Gill, and AJ was a big supporter of Gil, and somehow that's how all of this came down. November of, I believe I saw that it was November or October of 1910, because this happens in 1911. Um, that's when it was first noticed. Okay, but the detective didn't have enough information, and then all of a sudden, the letters were found. Um, okay, so C.B. Blethen was the son, managing editor of the Times. Mike Powers is an inspector of police. Ludovic and Charles Berryman are proprietors of the Arcade Dance Hall, the most notorious rendezvous of vice ever known on the coast. Um, okay, and we'll get to that in a second. Let's see. Wappenstein is the chief of police. We'll see his name quite a bit through all of this. Um, he's also seen as Wappy. And this case is insane. Absolutely, or it feels like it. This the charges brought by the grand jury shows up in May of 1911. Okay, so that's when everything appears. Okay, that's when it brought, and they have a lot of, I believe I have the list here. Go back, and I will put them right here. It's a lot of them have the same thing, like conspiring to protect gambling houses and houses of prostitution, maintaining public nuisance in the form of arcade dance hall with criminally uh, libeling, I think that's the word, JYC Kellogg City Councilman. So pretty serious stuff. And but the thing is that this thing just drags on. I mean, it really does. Now I'm on the website uh for all this, and okay, I'll come back to that because December it was still going. Okay. December still going, but it really took off in November. It was like basically judges were like, we got to get them into the courtroom. We're tired of trying to find juries. We're tired of all of it. And then once they get them into court and they actually start, it's like it's a madhouse because I saw where there were witnesses saying that they were bought off and stuff like that. And let's see if I can find it. I mean, there's a newspaper at the time. I don't know if it's still going, but it's called the Seattle Republican, and they are just ripping apart. They're ripping apart AJ for good reason. I was seeing a lot of little snippets here. Apparently, there was also a fight, which, yeah, there was a fight between AJ and another newspaper man, and so that came up too. I didn't see much about that because I couldn't find anything on the other guy because his name didn't come up. I would, I don't know, but I was like, oh great, we have a Pulitzer and Hearst over here too. Okay, what's going on there? And But let's see. Okay, when is this? Okay, no, no, no. Let's see. By June, let's see what we got here. So in June, the Blethens are in court following the issuance of five informations against his son's name is Clarence. I'm sorry, I thought it was something else. Um and Joseph Ble oh, there was another son that went in. I thought it was just the one. Okay. Uh they placed them under arrest and allowed them to go to their own uh let them go on their own record. They are to appear in court Saturday morning. Um There was a back and forth about the bail. There was back and forth about there was I was noticing a lot of special treatment with AJ. Now with the other guys, with the chief of police and especially with the owners of this dance hall, it was like they didn't post bail for them, but it was like, oh yeah, we can let AJ go and his son go. No problem. I have a hair right next to my nose, so sorry about that. But it was like there was some so I looked up AJ and his family, and from what I was gathering was basically that he was just a newspaper man and he founded the Seattle Times. Now, the Seattle Times is still uh, owned by family, so the Blethens still own it and everything. And um, but here's the kicker. Okay. Oh, let's see. Where was that one? Yeah, right here. Now there was, I mean, they found letters and there were fights that broke out. There were people that were saying that evidence was thrown out. There were, or not thrown out, but it was tampered with. There were the jury people that first they said that they would be part of it, and then all of a sudden they're like they were threatened and all of this stuff. I mean, like I said, it was a madhouse. And and everything. And in December 2nd, I found this article that said that the judge let AJ Blethen off. He's not guilty. So I'm reading this and they're reviewing testimony and all of this stuff. And now I did see where one witness made the claim that one of them, I don't remember who, tried to pay her off. And again, I don't remember who it was that tried to pay her off. So, but when they were reviewing the testimony and everything, this judge basically was trying to say, well, and I'll have it here. The judge is basically like, well, it's not a crime to be a fan of a politician or anything like that. Well, fair enough, but you got to look at the facts here. I mean, look what's been happening since May, my dude. And then talking about the concert hall. He brought up the concert hall or the dance hall, okay, and said, well, it's not a crime to own a dance hall and to, be in cahoots with somebody who owns a dance hall. Fair enough. But here's the thing that he's totally glossing over. Because basically he told the grand jury, you have to come back with not guilty. Okay, here's the thing. because the from the sound of it, the jury was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Okay, does he not understand that that could be a front? Like, like the dance hall had to be a front for the prostitution. Come on, or the gambling, whichever one it was. Come on. This is looking bad on you. People of the future are saying, "You're dumb. You're really, really dumb for real." So, so anyway, AJ was let off. Um, I'm not sure about the other. I didn't see anything about any of the other guys. I'm guessing that his son was let off as well. Clarence was as well. But it was the whole thing was just total madness. I mean, first of all, they have all this evidence against, the detective finds all that stuff, and then it just goes into massive chaos, one thing after another, and then all of a sudden the detective says, "Oh, yeah, they're not guilty. They're not guilty at all." And it's like, you do understand how fronts work, right? I I'm not okay. How long have you been a judge, my friend? And I did try to do a little more digging into the whole thing between this other guy, because the Republican newspaper kept bringing up AJ, and I'm sure that he was fighting with other newspapers. At one point, I did see where, and I'll put it up here real quick, where AJ sold a couple of his other newspapers during the trial. And I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt on that because at first, when I saw that, I was like, that looks bad on you. I mean, if you're getting rid, that could be like getting rid of evidence or something if you're on trial. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here because that could also be where he had two newspapers, you know, before he got rid of them, he had three altogether because there was also the Seattle Times. And the other two could have been tanking, you know, not doing very well, so he gave them to somebody who could actually salvage them. And so I'm given the benefit there because if you remember Pulitzer, when he took over the world, and even Hearst, the Journal, those two newspapers were dying, and those two guys fixed those newspapers. I mean, pretty much saved them. And of course, the journal, I think that was so anyway. But they did for a time. They were, and so I give the benefit there. Because yeah, at first I looked at it and I was like, dude, this does not look good. It looks like you're getting rid of evidence. But I think if he really wanted to get rid of evidence, he would have gotten rid of the Seattle Times. And but that is still family owned. So but yeah. I I just wanted to because I looked at it again and I realized that I wasn't explaining it very well, and I think I explained it better here. Anyway, back as usual. But anyway, I think I'm going to close it up here. And again, who do you think's going to win that boxing match? I don't know. I like both kids. They both have spunk. So anyway, I'll close up here.